Good evening, everyone. It looks like we have a full council here. It's at 6 o'clock. We'll give another minute or so for people to continue to log in, so please stay tuned.
You want to check one?
I hear you loud and clear, Dave.
I saw your immediate reaction.
All right, it is the witching hour, so we will call this meeting to order. This is the regular September 14th meeting of the Trinidad City Council, called to order. At this point, I will ask people to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, September 14th, as I said, and we have a very full agenda, so I'm going to move through the beginning of our agenda by asking for an approval of tonight's agenda. Councilors, do we have any substantive changes that are being requested of our agenda this evening?
I'll make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda. I'll second it.
We have a first and a second. Anyone not in favor of approving the agenda? All right, seeing none for that kind of vote, we don't need to do a roll call vote. So we have our agenda for this evening. Next is the consideration for the minutes from the August 10th meeting. We have that in the packet. Any substantive changes from the council requested for the minutes for August 10? All right, at this point, I'll open it up. Any public comment requesting substantive changes for the minutes from August 10? All right, seeing and hearing none, bring it back to council. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from August 10?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from August 10th.
I'll second that.
First, Grover, second by Klompus. Any councilors opposed to approving the minutes from August 10? And seeing none, we do have our minutes from August 10 approved. Thank you very much. At this point, we'll move on to council reports, starting with Mr. Davies.
Your report.
All right, Mr. West.
I've just got a short one. First of all, the 101 interchange, according to the last meeting, said that it should be done in about a month and a half from now. There's been problems with the 101 corridor. There seems to be some construction companies that are upset, that aren't going along with things anyway. They hope to have those things resolved next meeting, but at this point, it's kind of put a damper on things. We'll see how that comes out this week when I go back to HCOG. There should be coronavirus response money available. It may already be available. It will be, of course, it'll be done by population, so Trinidad will get a drop or two of the money. HCOG is going to be working still with, are going to try to keep on with hybrid meetings if possible, as we will be talking about later. But that seems to be what most places are doing. The final piece came out of West Haven and the Rancheria. West Haven is argued that the Rancheria may not be considering West Haven's concerns for widening the road, the West Haven Road, and the various activities or things that the Rancheria is going to do. So there were a lot of people concerned that they weren't being allowed to put in arguments for input. And so a number of people showed up and made that comment, but the Rancheria said that things aren't far enough along and they are going to allow West Haven to be involved. But that was one of the big items that came up in HCOG. So we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, that's my HCOG report.
Thank you, Mr. West. Mr. Grover?
Fairly short report on Redwood Coast Energy Authority. We did start our subcommittee for the offshore wind. That's really moving forward now that actually the Secretary of Interior and the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, BOEM, we do have, that's part of our presentation on number one. So I'm really happy to be involved in that. My other one is on number 8 of discussion, so I'll just wait on that one too before I elaborate. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Klompus.
Yes, I like to share my screen and make it easier. Let's see if we can do that. Okay. Can you see the committee report at the top?
Yes.
And you can hear me okay, I hope, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. There's been no Indian Gaming Benefits Committee since 2011, so that committee is inactive. The California Coastal National Monument Gateway Committee with the Trinidad Gateway Group is planning an appreciation weekend in Trinidad, September 25th and 26th. This will be a COVID safety protocol program with dispersed small groups that will include mini kayak tours, bilingual bird walks to the Trinidad Lighthouse, fishing for kids off the pier, seabird watching, and coastal cleanup. And more information can be found at trinidadcoastallandtrust.org. The Humboldt County Visitors Bureau continues to support activities in Trinidad just by listing it on their website. And if anyone needs programs listed, please let me know and I'll put you in contact with Julie Bembo, their executive director, to make sure it gets well organized and promoted. The Water Ad Hoc Committee, which really was put together last year to deal with drought and communications, which includes Jack West and myself, and support from the city manager, Eli Naffa, will be dissolved in the next week because the water shortage ordinance goes into effect that will create the water shortage response team, which will consist of the city manager, public works director, planning commissioner, and city council member. So this report that you're seeing today is the last one from this ad hoc committee. The next one will be from the water shortage response team. So to go over the drought report, Trinidad is still experiencing an extreme drought according to drought.gov. The last appreciable rain we had was actually June 15th. It's been about 13 weeks since the last rain that we had. The drought indicators for Trinidad range from severe drought to extreme drought. And again, this is all available. The latest was September the 7th at drought.gov. If you ladder up now to Humboldt County, the entire county is experiencing severe drought, but Trinidad, right here on this edge, is part of the county which is 72%, which is experiencing extreme drought. That indicates fire seasons all year long, water is inadequate for agriculture, wildlife, and urban needs, and also reservoirs are extremely low. Lake Oroville, which was built in 1967, is now reducing less power because of reduced levels. So one of the things I wanted to understand is that the municipal water for Eureka, Arcata, McKinleyville, and Blue Lake are all sourced essentially from Ruth Lake Reservoir. And I wanted to find out, how's the reservoir doing? Because many reservoirs in California are in pretty poor shape. Turns out that the Ruth Lake Reservoir is 80% full, doing actually very well. It's healthy. It was built back in 1960, filled with water in 62 to service the pulp mills. It actually cost $12 million. It's 7 miles long and a half-mile wide. But its reservoir is actually doing well, but it's mainly used today for municipal water supply versus water for industrial pulp mills. Trinidad does not have a reservoir. We have a creek, and I took a walk to the creek last week, took some photographs. This is what it looks like as of September 9th. The flow rate is 0.599, which we'll go over in just a few minutes. This is the creek bed. It's relatively bone dry except for the flow of water down here on the edge in between the sandbags. And what I've learned is that the city doesn't get water from the surface. It actually gets it from an infiltration gallery about 10 feet below the surface of the creek itself. And Ryan Desmond, our Director of Public Works, was actually able to measure the amount of water in that underground wet well. Again, it fills up because of the creek above it, but that level has been slowly decreasing every year for the past 5 years underneath in the infiltration gallery. So if we look at the creek and we kind of walk up to this area here, that'll be the next photograph. This is where the water comes down the hill. You can now walk across the creek pretty easily without getting your feet wet. So it looks different today in September than what it did in August and what it did in July. There's also been some discussion about getting water from Mill Creek. And I had not been there before, so I took a video. I'll share that with you on the same day, September 9th. This is what Mill Creek looks like. Again, my first visit to Mill Creek. You certainly can fill a canteen there, but it's not very promising as a municipal water supply. Looking at Mill Creek here, I know there'll be some photographs that Councilmember Dave Grover will show tonight as well from that. Let's go back to what's next. I know that many of you know I'm an optometrist, an eye doctor, and I've asked this question thousands of times in my career, which is better, but the city council will need to decide next month, essentially, which is better for Trinidad, one or two. So if we look at the data of the creek, and that's what's most important, Pacific Watershed provided manual readings of the creek flow last year. So to kind of orient you, the blue is flow rates for 2020. And it started out in June about 3 cubic feet per second. And then you get this decreased flow in blue. And that's really called a baseline flow. Think of the hills above the creek like a sponge. They fill up in the winter months, and then with no rain, they slowly leak the water out, and that becomes the base flow. We ended up in November with the first rains of about 0.81 cubic feet per second. This year, we had this tremendous rain June 15th. About a week later, the water went out to the Pacific Ocean, and now we're into this base flow. We had a stage 1 drought in July. August 24th, we declared a stage 2 drought with mandatory conservation. And here we are September 9th at about 0.6 cubic feet per second, 0.599. It's about a 41% drop compared to 30 days ago. And it's the lowest flow I recorded. When I get a whole list of a screenshot of like 50 different measurements taken over a day, I averaged them out. But the lowest one was 0.5. So if you think of the blue as being drought year 1, and now we have the gold year 2, the line keeps getting lower. It kind of zigzags up and down. It's not a straight line, but the trend certainly is downward versus up for that part. So that's the data I did want to share. We sent this card out about a month ago, which indicated stage 2 drought were well below 0.86 cubic feet per second with recommended restrictions. And the actual ordinance goes into effect next week for that ordinance. We added stickers on the back of the monthly water bills just to remind people. I know that there was a comment at the last council meeting from the public that this person didn't look at the back of their water bill. Well, hopefully the orange sticker now will stand out more than the pale salmon color that we had last month for stage 2. The stage 2 water warnings essentially means that you should not irrigate your lawn from 10 to 5 unless you want to use a bucket or watering can or drip irrigation. Don't irrigate unlandscaped areas. Hoses should have a cutoff nozzle or shut-off nozzle. Don't wash down the harder paved surfaces. Don't wash your buildings unless they're for sale or for being painted. Short-term rentals don't have to offer daily laundering of towels if they did. Food services in the city don't have to order water unless you ask for it. And the water shortage response team can audit water use if they find it necessary. The last committee report I have, the Trinidad Water Advisory Committee, which I'm really proud of. Its purpose is to evaluate the water needs of the city, to analyze potential options of water sources and infrastructure, assist the council in pursuing water-related opportunities, including funding. And the objectives are to provide a public forum to address and discuss water issues, assist the city manager and public works department in addressing water-related issues, to make balanced and informed recommendations to the city council to improve the supply of water, and report to the council regularly. Our meeting in July was 4 hours long. It was at some point heated and emotional. I'm happy to say that the meeting we had last week was a little less than 3 hours long, and people began to speak to one another instead of speaking at each other. The emotional level is reduced. I think people are just getting more comfortable talking about water and trying to figure out what's the best solution for the community. The committee members have worked hard. They've produced reports at each meeting. You'll hear Councilman Dave Grover's report tonight. Bryce Kenny has done an update on Mill Creek water rights. He was gracious enough to attend the meeting by Zoom from Boulder, Colorado, where he was traveling. A report you won't hear tonight, but was very good, maybe at the next meeting, is Planning Commissioner Cheryl Kelly's report on water catchment, which really ranged from rain barrels behind your home to a sophisticated $10,000 water collection system that would make the water potable for home use. So it was quite an illuminating presentation. And we also had a very nice presentation by Supervisor Steve Madrone on water catchment. The packet, which he included to be distributed with the meeting, included a 2-year feasibility study to look at tapping Franciscan Springs to help supplement the water or improve the quality of water at the water plant. And finally, I just want to share that research has been done for the city that really has been lost to memory. Becky Price Hall, our grants administrator, found a 2003 Winslow and Kelly water feasibility study, which is just as appropriate today as it was back in 2003. I scanned all 500 pages and made PDFs available so people can look at them if they want to. I'm going to go over just a few minimal highlights from that report, which I think is important. Again, you can look at this from the lens of 2003 compared to now. So the report verbatim is that the Trinidad water system is now nearing its maximum number of connections. The flow rate and quality of water varies throughout the year and is dependent on the weather. Winter flows can be very high, but turbidity increases due to surface runoff makes the water difficult to treat. And that's the main reason why you would want to tap Franciscan Springs. Surface water has organic material in it, and the system we have with the waterworks does its best job to filter that out, but you never get all of it out. And what happens when you mix it with chlorine, you get these disinfection byproducts that can cause cancer. So you really want to have the least amount of turbidity and the best filtration system that you can to have healthy water for the town. Also, the movement of water through the aquifer can prolong the water and springs in the rainy months, but prolonged dry periods will cause the springs and creeks to have decreased flow or perhaps dry entirely. And again, this goes back to a 2003 engineering study. One suggestion to increase water supply was to obtain water rights to the springs above Livinall's Creek. This is exactly what Supervisor Madrone presented. It's likely that due to the connected nature of the springs and the creek and the watershed, that any withdrawal of water from the springs would decrease flow of water to the creek itself and reduce availability of water at the Trinidad water plant location. So the net benefit gained from tapping springs within the watershed would be minimal, if any. The main benefit, as I mentioned, is that you get improved source quality. And this was a question that Planning Commissioner Kelly had for Supervisor Matrone, asking, is the tapping of springs more for quality or is it more to improve quantity? And the response was, it really was to improve the quality of water, which can be important. Tapping of springs by the city would likely require new water rights, obtain easements on or ownership of lands where the springs are located, and routes where the pipelines would convey water to the treatment plant. The environmental impacts and costs of such a system will be significant. And these are all verbatim findings from the report. Changes in land use and land management can affect the surface runoff and capacity of the watershed to store precipitation in the subsurface. And Green Diamond Resources Company's land management, such as timber harvesting, again, we don't control what goes on in that land, can reduce the ability of water to infiltrate into the subsurface, reduce the amount of water stored during periods of wet weather that may be available during dry weather. Interestingly enough, 18 years ago, the study recommended an additional storage tank for the city of 250,000 gallons and recommended the city upgrade their asbestos pipes from 8 to 10 inch up to 12 inches for more capacity and reliability. And the final summary I want to share from these findings is that no net water supply would be gained from tapping springs. Obtaining land use rights and easements would be complicated and expensive. The environmental impacts and cost of multiple pipelines from the springs to the water plant would be significant. Finally, a viable municipal water source must consistently be able to produce a significant volume of water, and that would be year-round, not just during the wet months. And the final conclusion of the report, which I found pretty astounding, is that it's not realistically feasible to develop a significant municipal water supply for the city of Trinidad from springs or groundwater. And again, this goes back to 2003. So it was quite an impressive document. Again, I scanned it. I gave PDF copies both to the city manager and the city clerk so they could post them on the website if people wanted to take a look at it. So that concludes my 5 committee reports. If there's any questions from council members, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
Any questions, comments for Richard? All right, I attended the Redwood Region Economic Development. Just a noteworthy, the increase in loans going out to local businesses for either startup or increasing capacity of the business has gone up over 30% during COVID. So I'm happy to report that their use of their lending power has really helped the local economy significantly, and they've been able to restructure a lot of their loans to actually reduce the payments that that businesses are required to give back. So pretty impressive work on the economic development side. I also want to add some pretty significant information that you left out, Richard, in your supply of information about the water. I too get all the same reports that you do on the creek's flow. Our maximum creek flow in the last week was 0.8 CFS. In fact, every night the flow hovers somewhere in the vicinity of 0.7, 0.75. I think that's a pretty significant omission of information that that should not go overlooked. That our creek has the capacity to flow at 0.7, 0.8, something like that. And clearly the use upstream is a consideration, and I'm grateful that Pacific Watersheds will be providing information on water rights and use upstream. So that, and then my final comment is I'm going to encourage folks to reach out to planning@parks.ca.
You're muted. You muted yourself, Steve.
Thank you. Planning@parks.ca.gov is a email that you can weigh in on the naming of our nearest state park to Sumeg State Park. So I encourage people to provide input on the naming of our local state park to planning@parks.ca.gov. So that is my report for this evening, and we will move on to staff report.
Like to make a comment, please?
No, we're going to move on. You've taken an exceptional amount of time on the water, and we have next month,
a point of order
to move forward with our water report. Eli,
point of order.
What's that, Richard?
When I create a hydrograph, I average every number which is provided.
So this is a disagreement that you and I can take offline. I really am not going to burn more city time, and you and I can take this offline and perhaps come to some sort of agreement for next month's meeting. So, Eli, staff report, please.
First of all, with law enforcement, Lieutenant Miller is unable to be at tonight's meeting, so he gave me the Trinidad stats from the sheriff's office, and it compares July to August. And this is for the greater Trinidad area, so it's not just for the city, but includes West Haven and includes areas that are north on Patrick's Point and Stagecoach. So this is anything that's in the 95570 area code. Calls for service in July were 225. In August, they're 207. Reports taken in July were 15, and in August, 16. Arrests made in July, 2, in August, 3. Felony investigations, 1 in July, 1 in August. And misdemeanor investigations, 1 in July and 4 in August. And miscellaneous calls were 151 in July and 139 in August. So if there's any questions regarding the law enforcement report, otherwise I'll move into the city manager's report. So as far as the city manager's report, I do have it included in the packet. And in addition to that, I did get an update from Verizon. And Verizon is working on their second tower. Their first tower is in operation, and the second tower is down in West Haven that they're constructing. And once that second tower is done, then they will test them and see how the service compares to our current service from the Trinidad head site. As far as the update for the West Haven tower, the physical completion of the tower construction should be by the end of October. And at that point, delivery of power should occur to the tower. And then the tower is forecast to be in service by the end of 2021. So by the end of December, 2 months later. And then after that, they will test it and compare it, how the current service is from those 2 towers compared to our existing Trinidad head tower. And then if the service is as expected, which should be equal to or better than what we currently have, then they will decommission the they will decommission the Trinidad head site and then just run solely on West Haven and Quarry Road on those 2 sites. So that should be happening in the first quarter of 2022, basically in January. And that's all I have, other than the fact that I got a notice that we should be getting some decent rain this weekend. They just said beneficial rain is likely this weekend, and amounts will be somewhere around 0.5 in and around Humboldt Bay, and as much as 1 inch up towards Del Norte. And we're partway between both. So hopefully we'll get somewhere around 0.7 or 0.75. So we'll see. And that'll be Saturday morning through Sunday evening. So for Saturday and Sunday. And that's all I have. If there's any questions, Dwight?
Eli, real quick,
Yes.
Eli, can you, do you have enough information, what you shared with me about the sheriff deputy shortage, that you can inform folks?
Oh, yeah. I had a meeting with the deputies today, with the sheriff's office, and they do have a shortage in the county. And as a result, it will be impacting their whole service area, including us. So I will be getting more information, and I'll share that with the council, at an upcoming meeting.
I just wanted to make sure folks are aware that the sheriff is experiencing significant shortages of deputies, and to continue the fine work that folks are doing, looking out for each other. I know down my street, folks are keeping an eye on things. So as we, as a county, struggle with having adequate coverage, just really look out for each other. So, Dwight, I see that your hand is up. Is this regarding the comments from Eli, or is this regarding anything else?
This is a question of the city manager on his report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This specifically, I looked in the notes on the that you posted on the agenda, and there was no mention in there of the motion in August that was passed by the city council for the city staff to determine the costs, time to completion, and other contractual issues sufficient for a decision by the city council on participating in a contract with Humboldt Bay and the Trinidad Rancheria at the October 12th meeting. And a couple of weeks ago, I asked for an update, and you mentioned that GHG had been asked to determine pipeline specifications, and I appreciate that very much. But I note that the motion as passed did request costs, time to completion, and other contractual issues sufficient for decision by the city council to participate in a contract. And I think that would be a little bit more than just what size pipeline. So could you give us an update or a request that we have frequent information about what is being done to meet the council motion that was passed in August for the October 12th?
Yes. Dwight is part of our Water Advisory Committee, and Dwight sent me an email, and he was requesting some more information on Thursday, and I was able to go ahead and forward that to Steve Allen of GHD, who's our city engineer, and I did get a response from him yesterday, and then I actually forwarded to you this afternoon.
Yes.
My response. Were you able to receive it?
Yeah, I did get your response, and I appreciate it. I wanted people at the committee, at the council meeting, to be aware that there's basically a 2-month provision was given for GHD to work on getting ready for a contract, and that 1 month has passed, and basically not much has been requested by city staff per the motion that passed.
Okay, so what? There was a proposal for the $4,800 presented by GHD. They've been working on everything that's in the proposal, including the fact that I requested at the end of the council meeting for them to give us a cost estimation of the new line. So everything that was identified on that, plus the cost estimation of the new line, they've been working on since our meeting.
The message I received was that GHG had just been informed about the specific motion, and details of their activities had not been specifically requested until just a few days ago.
Yeah. So what they're saying is the specific motion, the wording of the motion. Now, attached to the motion was the plan of what they would be doing, the scope of work. So the scope of work that they proposed for the $4,800 is being addressed. In addition to that, Steve did indicate that the exact wording of the motion he had not seen. So this way he did get the exact wording of the motion, which you had forwarded.
Yeah. And what I was concerned with is that what they gave a proposal for some time ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, was in response to something that was other than the request of the motion. In other words, were they directed to determine the costs and time of completion and other contractual issues? Steve's language, Steve Allen of GHD, his language in reply that I got today, that you forwarded, seemed to indicate that he wasn't aware of the specific things that they were asked to do in the motion. That was the specifics I was asking about. I realize there may be some communication issues here.
Right.
But I'd like to alert everybody at today's meeting that there's a very short time to determine something that is very, basically, it takes time for for our engineer to determine the kinds of things that were requested in that motion. And some time has gone by without clear communication about what was expected. Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, I disagree with your, conclusion.
Okay.
The additional thing that he is addressing, other than what was said before, was the time to completion, which he would have to talk with Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District to help determine what that time to completion would be. But other than that, I think almost everything else is there. Steve Allen is also on here, and he's going to be addressing, our stormwater project. But Steve, is there anything that you would like to add at this point?
To make sure I got off mute. No, there's nothing particular to add. I think we are clear on what's being asked of us at this point and do plan to have that information available. So we'll work diligently to help make that happen.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other closing questions, comments for City Manager regarding his report? All right. Thank you very much. And we will move on now. Items from the floor. I'll read this as I customarily do. At this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not to individual council members or staff. Council responses and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. At this point, I open it up to items from the floor, and I have 2 screens worth of people. So really, if I could encourage those who are using Zoom to use the hand raising feature, because it puts you right in my view. But I can see Anita, her actual human hand is up. So I'll call on Anita first.
Okay. I wanted to give a shout out to Jan West for her community outreach to get more people vaccinated in our county. Jan West went door to door to distribute flyers announcing Humboldt County's COVID-19 vaccine clinics at Trinidad Town Hall. She also attended and facilitated these clinics. Jan West is a great example of civic participation, and I commend her work to keep our community safe. I also wanted to say one more thing. It's right now I'm pretty upset because I find it unacceptable that council member Klumpus was not allowed to speak after it was implied that after his thorough, well-researched report, it was implied that it was manipulated, which I know to believe from knowing how thorough he is that couldn't be true. There's plenty of time to hear all reports and data, especially when it comes to this water issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. And I put in the chat that I believe somewhere in the vicinity of over 50 people were vaccinated as a result of Jan's effort, or at least partially a result of her efforts. Other items from the floor at this time. All right, seeing none, we will move on to the rest of our agenda. At this point, we move to the consent agenda. All matters of the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any items. If discussion is requested by any council member That item is removed from the consent and considered separately. A single opportunity for public comment on the consent is available. Tonight we have staff activity report, financial statements, and law enforcement report. Any public comment regarding the consent agenda? All right. Any counselors wish to pull an item for discussion?
I'll make a motion that we accept it.
First for Mr. Grover, second for Mr. West. Anyone not in favor of approving the consent agenda? All right. Seeing no dissent, the consent agenda passes unanimously. At this point, we'll move into the discussion action agenda items. Our first item for this evening, presentation on offshore wind energy area, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, U.S. Department of Interior. Eli, would you mind introducing our experts from, is it BOEM? Is it BEAM? How do you pronounce B-O-M-E? B-O-E-M.
Yeah, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. BOEM,
there we go, much better.
Bureau of Energy Management.
Okay, so Dave Ball is present here along with two of his workers and, cohorts. I don't know what the exact title would be, but they have other positions in BOEM. And as a result, we had requested, they sent us a letter indicating that this Humboldt wind energy area is being planned offshore and wanted to receive input. And we requested that if they could appear at a council meeting, so this way to better inform the council and at the same time to help answer any questions that the council or the public have. So I will turn it over to Dave. He can introduce both Lisa and Jean, and they have a PowerPoint presentation for us. So take it over, Dave.
Thanks. Yeah. So my name is Dave Ball. I'm the Pacific Region Historic Preservation Officer for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And I'm going to try to share my screen as I turn this over to Jean Thurston Keller and Lisa Gilbane to talk about our leasing process and environmental review. So bear with me just a moment. Hopefully this will work. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, Dave, I'm seeing it. I just need to put it in presenter mode.
I knew this would not come off without a hitch. Let's see. View, there we go.
I like to go down. If you go down to the bottom, yeah, that's one I like.
How's that?
That looks good.
That looks good.
Sorry about that. Okay, take it away.
All right. Good evening, BOEM. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about offshore wind energy development. My name is Jean Thurston Keller, and I am the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's California Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force Coordinator and the California Project Lead for the Bureau's Pacific Regional Office. In addition to myself, you've already met Mr. Dave Ball and Ms. Lisa Gilbane from our office, who will be available to answer any questions you have tonight. Next slide, please, Dave. So we'll go over the key items we're going to go over tonight, which is first, we're going to start with a brief overview of how offshore wind energy works. And then we'll walk through what BOEM and the state of California have been doing for a joint collaborative approach to planning for potential offshore wind development and what that looks like. And then we'll focus on where BOEM is considering potential areas for potential development. And then finally, we'll take a look at next steps. Next slide, please. But first, I wanted to kind of take a little brief moment to talk about the basics of the technology, like what does an offshore wind farm look like? So offshore wind farms are really similar to structures you see on land and land-based wind farms. However, there's some key differences. The first is that offshore wind turbines are larger and taller than those that are found on land. They can be up to 600 feet tall. I'll give you an idea, that's very close to the size of the Golden Gate Bridge. Floating wind turbines must be anchored to the seafloor with mooring systems, and they're electrically connected together with inter-array cables that can transport the energy to an offshore substation where amperage is increased to send it to shore via export cable. And these cables are often buried, and they would connect the electricity to the shoreline from the turbine basically into the larger electrical grid. Next slide. So I started with the technology because that's really how we started our planning process for California. Is we began with the basics and started with the technical constraints first to answer the question of where could the technology even go. So starting with the wind resource, we had to look at places that were greater than 7 meters per second, that's about 15 miles an hour, based on recommendations from the National Renewable Energy Lab for cost efficiency for a project. Areas in gray are less than 7 meters per second, and they aren't really strong enough to support a project. So that's most of Southern California. So then we looked at the water depths. And again, we consulted the experts of the National Renewable Energy Lab, and they recommended about 1,100 meters as likely maximum depths for the technology to stay cost competitive, because as you get deeper, things get more expensive. We also avoided the national marine sanctuaries, which you'll see in your screen is shown in bright blue. This left us with really about 6% of all of the federal waters offshore California could even technically support offshore wind development. So this really bifurcated the state into two primary areas of focus. The North Coast area, up by Del Norte and going down past Cape Mendocino towards Jenner, and then on the Central Coast between Cambria and Point Conception. We also considered where existing interconnection points to the grid were already located. And in Northern California, that would be in Eureka, and on the Central Coast, there was Diablo Canyon Nuclear Plant. And so we focused our efforts near these areas. And through conversations with the public and input from state agencies, we also did an initial screening because we wanted to avoid areas that were closer to shore that tended to have higher concentrations of fishing activities, also higher concentrations of submerged cables, as well as heavily used traffic areas offshore, such as the Santa Barbara Channel area by Point Conception. Next slide. Because in the picture that I showed you, the projects would have a cable that crosses from federal waters through state waters, and connects to land where there'd be some local jurisdictions as well. This requires really a joint planning process. And so BOEM and the state of California established an intergovernmental renewable energy task force in 2016 to look at offshore wind energy planning and those jurisdictional responsibilities. And so that task force, which is a government forum that includes sovereign tribal nations, representatives of the U.S. federal government and the government of California and its agencies, as well as locally elected representatives at the state, county, and city levels. And through early discussions, BOEM and the state of California developed a joint outreach plan. So we started with a plan and created a website to house data and information that we would be collectively gathering through our planning process. And in 2018, after many months of initial public outreach, BOEM and the state identified 3 areas offshore California based on our initial screening. And these areas were published for official formal comment in the Federal Register. We received over 100 comments and 14 nominations from developers interested in projects. The results of this outreach and more information is summarized in 2 editions of our outreach Offshore Wind Energy Planning Outreach Summary Report at the link provided at the bottom of the screen. Next slide. So what did this input look like, and what have we been doing with it? So input from stakeholders have identified a number of key issues, including fishing, environmental concerns, and potential visual impacts, as well as noise impacts from development. And so in response, we've been working with the Pacific Fisheries Management Council and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to begin more fishing-related studies to really better understand fishing dynamics, which really changes a lot over time. and seasonally. So stakeholders also expressed concerns about potential visual impacts. And so we worked with California State Parks and the California Coastal Commission to develop visual simulations of what a imaginary offshore wind farm would look like from key points along the coast. So those are available online on our website if you're interested in seeing those. And we worked with the Departments of Defense and Interior with long discussions about military testing and training to look at some compatibility issues on the Central Coast. Next slide, please. So here's a slide on our California Offshore Wind Energy Gateway. That's that data portal that I told you about that we developed. If you'd like more information on the different data sets that we have available. And as new data becomes available, we collaborate with our partners to get this data onto the gateway. This is a public gateway. It's available. You can look at all of the data that the agency is going to be using to make our decisions. And this data is really important because it really can feed into our key environmental reviews and decision points in BOEM's renewable energy authorization process. Next slide, please. Which leads us to our process. BOEM's process follows 4 phases, starting at the top left, the planning analysis phase, leasing, site assessment, and then finally construction operations. Right now, we are in the first phase of the process, the planning and analysis phase, which we started in 2016 with the establishment of the task force. And in 2018, we identified 3 areas offshore California for potential leasing and published these areas in a Federal Register notice that I also mentioned before. That's where BOEM initiates the leasing process call arrow right underneath the planning and analysis title there. Following publication of a call, BOEM would use the comments it receives to identify the areas that appear to be the most suitable for future leasing through a process known as area identification. These areas we call wind energy areas, and they're the focus of an environmental review under the National Environmental Policy Act. So the areas we identified in the call, we winnow down into wind energy areas, which are further looked at more closely with an environmental review. And after environmental review, if areas are offered for leasing, we move to the next phase of the process known as the leasing phase. This includes more opportunity for public comment, includes a couple more notices in the Federal Register. It also includes federal consistency under the Coastal Zone Management Act. So the California Coastal Commission will review these areas as well. And then the leasing phase would conclude with BOEM conducting a lease auction where 1 or more leases would be issued for potentially an offshore wind farm or multiple farms. We anticipate a lease auction will occur fall of 2022, so fall of next year. A lease, however, doesn't allow construction to begin at all. A developer must conduct site surveys before designing a project. And so that gets us to the 3rd phase, which is the site assessment phase. And developers have up to 5 years to conduct these site characterization surveys to really assess the lease areas in minute detail. Surveys would answer questions such as what is the tensile strength of the seabed? What does the seabed look like? Are there any canyons? Are there rocks? And the surveys would also be done to answer some data gaps, like could there be uncharted shipwrecks? And knowing if those exist. So there's a lot of surveys that would need to be done. So basically, a lessee needs to do all these surveys first in order to answer questions of how to construct a project, the best size of the turbines to select, the places strong enough to anchor a structure, and what the anchoring system would even be engineered to, what specifications. And so this phase would end when we have a developer submit a construction operation plan to BOEM, and that's our 4th phase. A second NEPA environmental review would examine the results of any of these surveys and proposed construction and operation design plans of an actual specific project. So this is also where we have a second federal consistency review. So in brief, there's 2 NEPA processes. There's 2 federal consistency reviews. The first one is for lease issuance and anticipated site characterization survey work. And then a second environmental review would be for the specific construction operation plan that's designed based on the results of the surveys. So next slide. Here's a close-up. Go to the next slide. I think I have some animations on here. Yeah, so Humboldt is right here and Morro Bay is right over there. There you go. So we have gone through the area identification phase with Humboldt, and we've just started an environmental review. And Lisa's going to talk about that right after my presentation. For Morro Bay on the Central Coast, we're a little farther behind. We're going through more area identification based on some concerns with the Department of Defense. Next slide. So both the Morro Bay area and the Humboldt area, if they move forward in the leasing process, would be combined at the proposed sale notice stage. So that would lead us to one lease auction for the state of California. Next slide. So these are, I talked about a lot of different terms just now, so I just want to kind of go over them real quick. The call for information and nominations, it's a call for public comment about the area. It requests nominations of interest from developers, and it describes the area that we're considering. A wind to energy area is an area within a call area that's identified by BOEM for environmental review. And it's the basis for the lease area, and it can include the entire call area. And a lease area would be the area that BOEM would offer for lease during a lease sale. Next slide. So these are the three areas that BOEM initially identified in our planning efforts in 2018. You have the Humboldt wind energy area offshore Eureka, and then on the Central Coast, you have the Morro Bay and Diablo Canyon call areas. And due to military constraints, BOEM is no longer considering the Diablo Canyon call area, which is the square at the farthest bottom of your screen. We're only looking at the Morro Bay area. Next slide. So focusing on what's right here for Humboldt, the Humboldt wind energy area is approximately 206 square miles. It's about 20 miles from shore. It's really around 22, I think. It's identical in size to the Humboldt call area that we initially offered for public comment in 2018. And we have an area identification memo that describes our process on the website there. And this area that you see on your screen will be the focus of an environmental review that BOEM has just started. Next slide. So next steps. So after public comments are considered, BOEM would undertake area identification on the Central Coast and may identify a wind energy area down there for environmental review, and then conduct environmental assessments. And this would include the Humboldt wind energy area, which we're in, I think we're still in scoping for. And then after completion of applicable environmental reviews, BOEM would publish a proposed sale notice for both the North Coast and Central Coast under a single all of California proposed sale notice, which has a 60-day public comment period. And BOEM would publish a final sale notice and then conduct a lease auction where one or more leases would be awarded. Again, lease does not allow for any construction to occur. They'd have to start survey work. And we anticipate holding an auction next fall. Next slide. So here's my contact information, and I will pass the next part of our presentation over to my colleague, Lisa. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Lisa. I work with Jean and Dave, and we promised you 15 minutes, and we want to stay true to that because we want to be invited back. So you have all my slides, and Jean did a great job. You don't need to hear more talking. So I'm just going to go and show you two slides real quick, that if you can go forward, Dave Ball, to the, so just to reiterate the highlights, and that is just look at the map. That's our wind energy area. It's about 20 miles as of right now offshore from Trinidad Head. So that's the area that you're likely more interested in. Maybe, I don't know where some of you fish, but that's my thought. And then if you could just go to the last slide in my presentation. I know it's a lot of this though. So I apologize. Next steps. So we just finished our scoping period, which means we were collecting comments, but I want you to know that we will take your comments and thoughts anytime to this email or to my email, please go to bohm.gov/California for more information. And that we're planning on coming out with a draft environmental assessment for the Humboldt area early next year. And so that would be a really great time to come back with more substantive analysis and talk if you guys would like. And we'd also love comments on what kinds of engagement would be effective for your community and for the North Coast in general. We're stuck in this virtual world and we're a little bit hamstrung on how to reach the groups we wish we could reach and looking for help. So that's all I want to say. And if we have time to answer your questions, we would love to. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. At this point, do we have any public comment? We'll start with public comment questions for our presenters from BOEM. Anyone wish to chime in?
I would like to ask what would be visible from on the shore from Trinidad Head or from the city of Trinidad?
Jean, can you give that one a shot? Do you mind?
Yeah, so they would be visible on a clear day. And they would also be lit in order to have no aircraft hit them. And so one of the things about having them lit is typically a mitigation measure is they have controlled lighting. So the lighting typically will be controlled by a aircraft that can turn it on and off. But the U.S. Coast Guard does require lighting for the foundational structures in order to prevent any collision. There's markings of the turbines and there's even paint requirements from the Coast Guard on how they would be painted. But we do have some visual simulations that we have done for offshore the North Coast. I think it is actually from Trinidad Head. I'd have to look at where the key observation point was. But we did talk with state parks about some of the important areas that were around there that would be the best spot to have those viewshed considerations and simulations done. So we also did them at elevation too, so that you could see them. You know, you're not maybe seeing them right when you're on the shoreline, but we all know the California coast is got a lot of cliffs and it's variable. And so we tried to pick an area that was a little bit higher up too. So I can send you a link. I can actually put that in the chat tonight if you would like. That takes you to those visual simulations. We also had them under different meteorological conditions. So on a clear day, what they would look like, what they'd look like at night, and what they'd look like, you know, based on some of the meteorological conditions you would see on a typical day on the North Coast. I'll put that in the chat right now, the link for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Miller, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I just want to compliment the team from BOEM. This is a very exciting project and has huge implications for green energy to offset the fossil fuels that we're accustomed to using. RCEA has been working on this project for a number of years, and Dave, I appreciate Councilman Grover working with RCEA on this because this is so powerful. It's kind of just something visual offshore for most of us, but it is so meaningful for our attempts to try and deal with the negatives of fossil fuels and warming the atmosphere. So thank you for your presentation.
Other comments or questions for our team from BOEM, council or public?
Yeah, I just want to thank you very much for this. I was one of the commenters in 2018 because I took my, I did a mock environmental impact report for a semester-long class under Jennifer Cult on offshore wind. So I wondered, like, some of that information, it was pretty detailed, like a viscous damping system, cannonboring mooring systems, things like that were almost in place from some non-destructive testing that was done with like 1,200-foot sparring buoys and things like that. Is that information relevant, or do those tests have to be redone because it was like we're talking a decade ago now. So is that something that has to be redone from scratch pretty much now?
I can try just real quick. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I think this would be once a lease is issued, there would be different companies at the site, and then when they are putting together their project information, that a lot of that detail would be required to be submitted to BOEM as part of our construction operation plan. So if it's still, depending on the project that they come up with, if it's still relevant, they could use it, but they have to take in consideration current standards and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. We do look forward to more from you as this project progresses, and we'll also ask Councilman Grover to keep us abreast of the timeline for public comment. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now moving on to item number 2, discussion decision regarding resolution 2012-10 endorsing single payer healthcare legislation request for AB 1400 and HR 1976. Eli, can you please introduce our speakers for this item?
We had Ross Ward will be presenting this, and we have a resolution included in the packet, and he will talk about the current 2 bills that are on a state level and the federal level that are dealing with single payer healthcare. So I'll turn it over to Ross.
Hi, I also have with me the presidents of the Healthcare for All Now California and Physicians for a National Healthcare Program, the Humboldt chapters. They're Corinne Fergoni and Patty Harvey, who can also answer any questions. But as Eli said, I'm here to ask the City Council to pass a resolution in favor of single payer, the current legislation. It's Assembly Bill 1400 and House or HR 1976, which would be the federal level. These single payer bills or single payer healthcare legislation would cover all, either at the federal level, all Americans or any residents of America, and at the state level, all residents of California. I think that this would be a boom to the economy in that it would help small businesses not have to provide healthcare to their employees, such as the city, the school, and potentially the casino. I think it would make our healthcare system a lot more manageable and simpler to follow. And a good example of this sort of healthcare is Jan West offering or trying to promote the vaccine to the city. It's been paid for by the American public and it is ours to use. So, sorry, I am just here to ask that you reaffirm your resolution. I believe it was resolution 2018-03, in which the City Council endorsed SB 562. So this is just the current legislation. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer them, or Patty or Corinne can. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ross. And thanks for the reminder that we are basically continuing our support from an earlier resolution as new legislation works its way through. Any questions or comments for Ross or his team from the council or from the general public?
Thank you for bringing this to the attention and keeping us updated with this. I happen to be a member of the Green Party, and it is part of our platform. So you have my vote. So keep up the good work. Every developed nation has this pretty much. So,
Dwight, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I compliment the team from Healthcare for California for presenting again and again and again. It's something that that cities like Trinidad have enthusiastically supported in the past, and I really encourage the council support this time. It's a difficult issue. It tends to get torpedoed by a few politicians at the state level, but let's keep trying. We deserve, just as Councilman Dave Grover just mentioned, we deserve a first-class health system like the other countries of the world. Thank you.
That's it.
All right. Any other comments or questions for our team? All right, we'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
I'll make the motion regarding Resolution 2012-10 endorsing single-payer healthcare legislation request for AB 1400 and HR 1976.
Second that motion.
So we have a first from Grover, a second from Davies, and I do see in the agenda table of contents, it's 2021-09. Sorry, 20. I just want to make sure we get the right resolution. So we have 2012-10 in the agenda table of contents, but the resolution is 2021-09. So I just want to make sure that we're approving the right resolution. So we have a first from Grover, a second from Davies. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And again, thank you, Ross, Patty, and Corinne for joining us this evening. And we look forward to continued success in this arena.
Thank you, Trinidad.
Thank you very much.
All right. Moving on to item number 3, Prop 84 ASBS Stormwater Project Update. Eli, please take it away.
Okay, so we have a stormwater project that's, of course, being planned for this year, and the contract was awarded to GRS back in, I think it was in June, and we were supposed to have construction starting in the summer. It's been delayed trying to get materials, and we had a meeting recently where our city staff, along with our city engineers from GHD and also from GRS, which is GR Sundberg, the project managers from there were on the call. And I asked for both of them to be present here. So we do have representative from GHD, Steve Allen, and a representative from GR Sundberg, Casey Poff. And I'll turn it over to Steve Allen, our city engineer.
Okay, this is
And then
Steve.
let me just note also, we do have Becky Price Hall, who's our grant administrator. And I think I'll turn it over to her since she prepared the agenda item, and then she could turn it over to Steve after that. So.
Hi, this is Becky. I'll just make one note before we talk about the construction. The city, as stated in the report, has been notified by the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the State Water Resources Control Board that a permit will be needed for discharging to groundwater, which when we began the project, that had never been brought up. So that's new information that we're bringing to the council, and the city engineer and other staff at GHD, Steve and others, are assisting us with providing information needed to start the permit process. And so we'll provide additional information probably next month as things progress. But we just wanted the council to be aware that there's a new requirement that had not been given to us previously. All right, and I will turn it over to Steve Allen about the project construction scheduling.
Okay, thanks, Becky. This is Steve. So regarding the schedule, as Eli noted, the work was awarded in June, and we'd hoped to build this summer in order to be done before the rainy season. We knew that there were some long lead times for some of the construction materials, and that is still the case, and that's not unique just to this project or these materials, but the construction industry in general. So we've been working with GRS and their material suppliers who had some suggestions and questions about some potential changes, which we entertained and discussed with the city, some of which were acceptable, some of which didn't quite work out with the grant requirements. So we've been with the contractor and going through the process of identifying the needed materials and working with the manufacturer to find out when the deliverable dates could be. So as Eli mentioned, the project's been postponed, but it is still moving ahead, just not as quickly as maybe we'd all hoped. But I guess part of the good news is that we also generally hope that we're not going to have a lot of disruptions to the summer tourist season. So that's turning out to be a bonus in this case. But we're working with the contractor to try to finalize the schedule and deliver the project.
Ms. Fragoni, do you mind putting yourself on mute? Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Poff was going to chime in as well.
This is Casey with GR Sunberg. I'm the project manager for Randy on this project. I think Steve really kind of noted everything. I think the construction industry in whole, especially on steel materials, that's going to be the outfall infiltration chambers on this job. I mean, have always been looking at like a 20 to 25 week lead time on some of these materials. And, you know, it's been our intent the whole time to provide a system, you know, for the city that's going to be very maintainable and the best it can be. So we've been really trying to look at the plans and make some suggestions along with our supplier at Contact. So I think that, you know, trying to get these lead times dialed in and get the product best for the city of Trinidad, that's what the team's been working on here. So I think Steve really covered everything very well. If anybody has any specific things towards GRS or the contractor here, I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you, Casey. Any comments, questions for Casey, Steve, or Becky from the council at this point?
Thanks for the update.
Can you guys elaborate a little bit more on the permit that's required? And I don't remember the timing, but I believe that there was some sort of date by which the city was not allowed to discharge into the bay because of the ASBS. Can you describe how the timing of this affects those two different components?
So this is Becky. There actually are two permits that are relevant to the city's stormwater. The first permit is the called Ms4 permit, where the city has been authorized to discharge stormwater into Trinidad Bay at Launcher Beach, and that permit came. The city enrolled in that permit in 2013, and the requirements, because it's an area of special biological significance, were that the city install physical best management practices, which would be examples of that are the city's infiltration chambers and the rain garden and the parking bioswales. So the city has been installing BMPs since 2013. And the deadline was 6 years after the permit went into effect. However, we have requested several extensions of that because we couldn't get our funding pulled together to complete the project. So long story, but the understanding was the city would no longer need that permit when this stormwater project had been completed. The water board legal team has since said, we received this information a little bit earlier this year, that even if we do not have a discharge into the bay, we will still need a permit because there's the possibility that there could be an overflow. So Steve could say more about that when I finish here. But the other permit is the groundwater discharge permit, and that's a new one. And that doesn't have any specific deadlines, except that the regional board would prefer that we had that permit, that we have submitted the application for that permit before the project is completed and we begin discharging into our infiltration galleries that are being constructed. And I'll let Steve clarify anything that I didn't quite get right. But so there's no specific deadline except for upon project completion for the groundwater permit. The other permit, the stormwater discharge into the bay, is there's no deadline because it's going to be an ongoing permit. So, and I'll turn it over to Steve now.
I think you gave a good overview, Becky. Unless there's specific questions, I'll just stop there.
No, thank you very much. That definitely answers the question. So any other comments, questions from the general public at this point or from the council?
So am I getting it correctly? The new infiltrators allow the water to dissipate so you don't need the discharge because you don't have that direct flow to the beach?
That's correct. Basically, we're capturing stormwater and treating it and infiltrating it, which is going to reduce the need for the actual physical ocean outfall on Muncher Beach.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the update. I imagine it's quite frustrating to be ready to go and not have the material. So again, appreciate working together on this to try to get our stormwater, the last phase of our stormwater project, complete by, well, when it's available to be completed. So thanks again for the update.
Did you want to open it up to any public questions or comments?
Yes, if there were public comments, I did that last with council and public. Let me see the second page here. I don't see any. All right. Thank you again. We'll move on to item number 4, discussion decision regarding small community drought relief program grant application.
Okay, and I will be turning this over to Becky since she's our grant administrator.
All right, this is Becky. The Department of Water Resources has they don't call it a solicitation, but they're accepting applications for small communities to apply for funding to address drought issues. And for a long time, there have been a couple projects on my radar that have also been recommended to council, including additional water storage and repairing leaky and old water mains. This grant opportunity is basically first come, first served, and it's not competitive, but the projects must be eligible. So it'll when we submit an application, the funder will review it, and if it's eligible, they will either recommend it for funding at as written, or they might adjust the amount that we have applied for based on availability. So because of the need to get this application submitted as quickly as possible, and also because of the recent recommendations from the Water Committee and Public Works, I am proposing that we apply for funding to repair leaky water lines with a possibility that we could apply for a water storage tank, or possibly both. I have not had enough time yet to fully review these possibilities to make sure that all parts of them are eligible. So we're requesting that council direct us to prepare an application that's eligible and the best application possible. And we could discuss what will be in the application tonight, or it could just be directed as I've written it. And there's a resolution that's for submitting the application. And I provided a summary of the guidelines. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions from the council for Becky regarding this agenda item? Tom?
Yes, thank you. So it would be great if we could get some funding for some storage and fixing leaks. I'm looking at the Small Community Drought Relief Program guidelines, and I'm trying to understand how we could get a permanent storage solution. It says on the second page, temporary community water tanks. And then I don't see anything about fixing leaks and things. So is there more information that details this kind of stuff? I mean, I think it'd be great if we could go for something like this. I just want to make sure that we're applying for something that's not, you have a temporary tank and then it can only be there for, until the water starts coming out of the sky again. And then they say that the drought is over.
Yes. So I'm trying to, maybe I didn't get enough of the guidelines put in here. I'm sorry, I'm just looking back in here because they did say that water storage was acceptable. And they also said that repairing leaky water lines was acceptable. And I apologize that I am not seeing that right now. So, okay. So if you look at the guidelines, there's B, intent and objectives. The third paragraph says improve water storage. The specific objectives are to implement projects that provide reliable water supply sources, improve water system storage, which would be storage tank, replace aging and leaky pipelines. So, as I said, we were trying to act quickly on this, but to me, that says replacing aging and leaky pipelines would be eligible, and also improving water storage. So I do need to do a little bit more research and probably talking to Department of Water Resources. There's a webinar on Thursday that I could send. There's a webinar on Thursday that will discuss this program, so I will have more information. But hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I would support this. It's interesting that they have seemingly conflicting information. But maybe there's two separate portions of how this gets put together. So thanks.
Mr. Columbus?
Yes, Becky, thank you for your help. One of the discussions we had at the Water Advisory Committee was not to have a 500,000 gallon tank, but rather two 250,000 gallon tanks, so that if one were to fail, you wouldn't lose everything. So I don't know whether it's better. Maybe you'll find out Thursday in the webinar whether you could apply for water storage if it could be for more than one tank versus one huge one versus two more medium-sized ones. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. And I am planning to speak with both Steve Allen and Rebecca Crow, who I will be relying on for more technical information. But that's a great point about not having all your water in one tank. And so we will make sure and take a look at that.
Other questions from the council before I open up to public for comment? All right, at this point, let's open it up to public for questions, comments regarding the Small Community Drought Relief Program grant application. Ms. Levine.
I would suggest, I don't know how much money is involved in the grants, but since fixing leaks is such a big ticket item, I would suggest focusing on that and waiting until after the October meeting, if possible, to decide about adding tanks. Our current tanks are not leaking. And if it's decided in October to hook up to Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, we wouldn't need extra holding tanks.
All right, thank you for your comment.
You're welcome.
Other comments from the general public? Let me check the next page. All right, not seeing any other folks who wish to comment, I'll bring it back to the council for action.
So you're looking for a motion? For
yes.
That? Okay,
sorry,
I don't have the packet in front of me right now. I don't want that. I'll wait so I don't misstate it.
Mr. Klumpus, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to pass resolution 2021-11, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Trinidad authorizing the grant application acceptance and execution for the Trinidad Drought Relief Project.
I'll second that.
So we have a first and second. Gabe, if I could have you do roll call votes for the discussion action items, I would appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the staff recommendations in the staff report, just making sure that the motion reflects the entire approval being requested, not only the resolution 2021-11, but authorizing staff to complete the application, which I think is in the resolution, and authorizing up to $4,000 in water funds to be spent for the grant application technical assistance. Can we rope that into this motion? Is that acceptable to the council?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll add that to the motion and we'll go ahead with the vote. We'll start with Councilmember West.
Yes.
Klompus.
Yes.
Grover.
On mute.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Davies.
Yes.
And Mayor Ladwig.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Moving on to item number 5, discussion decision regarding water shortage response team appointments, council member and planning commissioner. Mr. Naffa.
Okay. So we had at our prior meeting, approved the water shortage contingency plan. And as part of that, it creates a water shortage response team. Two of those positions on the team are identified, which would be myself and the Public Works Director. And then the other two are appointed, one by the City Council and one by the Planning Commission. So we're suggesting that the council appoint their council member, hopefully tonight, and then ask that the Planning Commission at their meeting tomorrow night address appointing a planning commissioner to the water shortage response team. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any councilors who wish to throw their name in the hat?
Yeah, I'd like to keep going with the water thing if possible. I believe a lot of our other stuff with our water advisory committee is over now, if I'm interpreting that correctly. But somebody can elaborate on that. I don't want to wear too many hats and make it wrong.
Yeah, the Water Advisory Committee is sort of winding down with the charge of researching and presenting on a variety of topics. So in terms of workload, I believe this would be, for you, a continuation instead of an addition, should you be selected.
Okay, yes, that's the confirmation I wanted. So yeah, I will throw my name in there, and if anybody else wants to make a little stump speech here on why they want the position.
Anybody want to challenge Dave for his offer? All right, let me get a quick opportunity for public input on the council appointment of a member of the council, rather, being appointed to the water shortage response team. Any public comment on this? All right. Bringing it back to council, I would definitely make a motion to approve David Grover's request to be appointed to the water shortage response team as a council member.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a first and a second. Again, Mr. Adams, if you don't mind, just for all of these items, doing a roll call vote, that would be great.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So we've got a motion from you, Mayor Ladwig, and a second from Councilmember West to appoint City Council Member David Grover to the Water Shortage Response Team and request the Planning Commission appoint a Planning Commissioner at their next meeting to the Water Shortage Response Team. And we'll start with a vote. Councilmember West?
Yes.
Klompus?
Yes.
Grover?
Yes.
Davies?
Yes.
Mayor Ladwig?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And thank you for offering to continue your involvement, Mr. Grover. At this point, we'll move on to item number 6, discussion decision to select dates, times, and council representatives to a government-to-government consultation with the Trinidad Rancheria. Eli, can you please introduce this topic?
Sure. So the Trinidad Rancheria, in a letter dated May 26, 2021, requested a government-to-government consultation to discuss the Trinidad head sign. At that point, the government-to-government policy for the city was not approved yet. However, at our last meeting, the government-to-government policy was approved, so that is in place now, and we can proceed with government-to-government consultation. The government-to-government policy notes that any involvement of any council members, 1, 2, or the whole body, would need to be done in an open session. Otherwise, staff could participate in a closed session. So this would be a request for an open session, and the request by the Rancheria is what they would like to have the consultation on either September 20th, next Monday, or September 21st, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. The City Council should appoint 2 council members as an ad hoc committee for the purpose of this particular consultation. And then I believe Jackie's on here, so maybe she could at some point just clarify if this would be via Zoom or would be in person. So we would know the availability of the council members' schedules, since several of our council members do work. So I'll turn it back over to you, Steve, and then if Jackie wants to weigh in, and then you guys can discuss and see who would be interested in serving on this ad hoc committee.
Thank you, Eli. Yes, Ms. Foster-Carmison, if you can weigh in on the nature of the format of the meeting or anything else that you wish to add, that would be great.
Thank you, Mayor Ladwig. Yes, I believe the tribal council did want to meet in person, if that is acceptable. If not, then Zoom would be, the second alternative. And we suggested September 20th and 21st, but those are not the only dates that would be available. So it just, if the council would prefer Zoom, then I'm sure the tribal council would accommodate that. But I think the intent was to do a face-to-face if possible.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I'll bring it back to the council for anyone who wishes to volunteer for this meeting with the Rancheria regarding the signage on Trinidad Head. Mr. Klompus?
I'd be more than happy to volunteer on either of those days. I was able to meet with Eli with a phone call to the Troy Ancestral Society, so I've kind of heard one aspect of it. It would be nice to hear another aspect to hopefully bring these two folks together to complete the sign.
And do you have a preference, Richard, for in-person or Zoom?
I would prefer Zoom just for safety purposes, but
okay.
I just, either way is fine, but Zoom would be my recommendation.
Okay. Do we have anyone else who is interested in participating in this ad hoc committee?
I'm interested, but I will be out of town both the 20th and 21st. So if we could do it by, if I could come in by Zoom, I could attend the meeting. I believe I've got to double check the calendar and see if, since I am visiting, I want to make sure I'm going to be here. But both days right now are free.
So council, we have two volunteers for participation in this ad hoc committee, both of whom it sounds like would prefer Zoom, one due to proximity and one due to health concerns. So at this point, do we have any further discussion?
I would also recommend Zoom because it's supposed to be an open public meeting. And at this time, we're not inviting the public to open public meetings in person. So that's all I have to say about that one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Davies, for reminding us of that. So at this point, any other comments from the council? Any public comment regarding the formation of an ad hoc committee to meet with the Rancheria regarding signage on Trinidad Head? Seeing none, at this point, I will bring it back to the council for a motion. And I'm happy to make it actually, since half of our council is on so the motion is to appoint council members Klompus and West to an ad hoc committee to meet with the Rancheria to discuss the Trinidad Head sign. And it just with the addition that next week, September 20th or 21st at 10, appears to meet both schedules. So that's the motion.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you for that. Gabe, again, if you don't mind doing a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think the motion that you recited was very clear, appointing council members West and Klompus to the ad hoc committee to meet to discuss the Trinidad Head sign with the Rancheria on the 20th or 21st, optional at their availability, and we'll go ahead with it.
I apologize, Gabe. I see that Ms. Hostler's hand is up.
Okay.
Jackie, did you want to add something?
I would just like to choose a date tonight.
Okay.
I can let the council know. So if the 20th works at 10 a.m., that would be great.
I amend my motion to to include the 20th at 10 a.m.
Amendment noted. And we'll go ahead with the vote. Councilmember West,
Yes.
Klompus,
Yes.
Grover,
Yes.
Davies,
Yes.
and Mayor Ladwig.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Quick clarification. Who will send out the Zoom invitation?
Eli can, the city manager can send that out.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see a hand from Ms. Provolt.
Yes, thank you so much. And since this is an open meeting, I'm assuming it will be on the city council calendar, so, and posted as you normally do special meetings. Thank you.
Yes, fully noticed, fully accessible to the public. Absolutely. All right, moving on to item number 7, presentation from Water Advisory Committee regarding Mill Creek water rights and motion to accumulate flow data for Mill Creek. Sorry about that, folks. So who would like to introduce our next, is it Bryce?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm here from 462 Ocean Avenue, Trinidad.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kinney. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. In your agenda packet was a short 4-page report going over kind of the history of the Mill Creek water rights and some other information. I'm sure you've all had a chance to read that, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the report. My recommendation is that the city start monitoring the flow of Mill Creek as it does with Luffenholtz Creek. Somehow in the packet, it got to be noted that the monitoring would only be over the next 5 weeks. And that wasn't my recommendation, and I don't think it makes any sense. But I do understand that at the October meeting, the city might be deciding whether it's going to get water from McKinleyville up here. But even if that happens, it will be many years before that actually gets here. So the city might want to consider utilizing the license that it currently has to take water out of Mill Creek as a, to shore it up until the water, gets here from McKinleyville, if that's what's going to happen. So my recommendation is just start keeping track of the flow out of Mill Creek, just so you know how much water is there and can make better informed decisions. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the council for Mr. Kinney regarding Mill Creek? Mr. Klompus.
Yeah, just a comment. We did talk about this at the committee, and I fully support the idea of getting some localized measurements. It would have to be done manually, so we don't have to go the expense of a telemetry system. But we discussed this pretty thoroughly at the Water Advisory Committee, and we all agree there should be some short-term measurements. So I want to support Mr. Kenny on this agenda item.
Okay. Other comments, questions from the council?
I would support this as well with the removal of the 5 weeks. That was the recommendation, that it's for longer than 5 weeks. From my recollection, I listened to the meeting.
Okay. Mr. West?
I agree with what Tom said. I think it's a great idea, and I'd like to see it go until, and maybe if we need to come back to the council to ask it to think that there'd be a good time to end it. But I think it's a good idea, and I like the idea of finding out that information. It also looks like it's a fairly low-cost plan, so I think it's good for everybody.
Okay. Mr. Klompus?
Yeah, if the rains are expected in November, To me, I would recommend that we do readings weekly up until November 1st. It doesn't really do any good to measure it when there's rainfall and we don't need water from that creek. So the idea was to measure the low flow and see whether or not it could be a supplement to Liffenholtz during the dry season. So it would be, to me, more straightforward to make weekly measurements at least until November 1st, and then rethink this and review it and see whether it's still worth it to continue beyond that.
I concur with most of what's been said here too. I'm not opposed to setting a longer time limit on. I think 5 weeks is too short. I'd like to see at least double that so we can make some determinations. But I also concur with what Councilmember Klump has said about when it's heavy rains come, it's kind of a moot point. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Kinney?
Yeah, actually, I disagree with that. It's not a moot point. You know, we monitor Liffenholtz Creek all the time, all year round, not just. So what you want to do is get an idea how much water comes down this creek, say in a year, for example. And
if we're using a measuring stick too, if it's manually, I guess it doesn't even matter either. Might as well just leave it there and keep track of it. That's what you're getting at there. But I agree with that.
Mr. Klumpus?
Yes, I do want to clarify, Bryce, that before the telemetry system was put in at a cost of about $28,000 to the city, we had manual measurements done, but only during the dry season. There were never measurements done at Liffenholtz in 2020 during the wet season. It stopped November 1st. So we can do measurements this year because we have the telemetry system beyond November 1st. But last year, when it was done manually, it stopped November 1st because of the rains.
right, but you know, everybody, it's been generally agreed that it's kind of a problem that we don't have good data, long-term data from Liffenholtz Creek because nobody was keeping track of it, you know, constantly. So seems to me, you know, if you have a resource, you should at least know to what, you know, what's the volume of it? What's it, how much water flows down there? It's up to you guys. You know, I'm just chiming in here, but it wouldn't be hard for somebody to check, you know, once every couple of weeks or, you know, throughout the year. But go ahead and set it up any way you want.
And what I'm hearing everyone really trying to maybe pin down a date or not, but really what I'm hearing is that we want to see what the capacity of Mill Creek is during the dry season. So if we want to word our efforts here to really just get a sense of the Mill Creek flow during the dry season, it may be November, it may be December, because that's what we're really after. So I just offer that as a consideration, because I agree that having a sense of what Mill Creek is capable of will inform what the city is doing.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. I think I like the direction we're going. Maybe do it until November 1st and then reassess if we want to continue the observation, which will most likely happen. You know, either way, it doesn't have to not happen no matter what we decide as a council, but at least till November 1st. I could put that into the form of a motion, but I don't think we've heard from the public yet, so I'll wait.
Yeah, I would like to open it up to the public, but it just, other comments, questions from the council before we open it up to the public? Mr. West?
We like to have this come back to the city manager then as to decide for him make a decision, or do we want it to come back to the council as far as the decision on whether to continue or not?
I think tonight's motion ought to give clear guidance to the duration. That just keeps it easier. The council meetings, you know, are once a month, and sometimes we're not able to get to it. So it seems like if we can come up with that direction tonight, that would be my recommendation for the duration of measuring the flow in Mill Creek. Let me open it up to the public and see what the public is thinking about the presentation on Mill Creek as a water source. Miss Levine.
I think it would be a waste of water funds to monitor Mill Creek because if Halls is too low to supply Trinidad, Mill Creek will be of no help since it's a smaller creek, just as susceptible to drought. However, if the council wishes to monitor Mill Creek for reasons I don't understand, I recommend the council authorize obtaining a legal easement to the old water plant site. First, there has been conflicting hearsay comments from the landowner, including he would probably grant easement, he may grant easement, he would probably not grant easement because it wouldn't do any good. So briefly, it makes no economic sense to invest funds in Mill Creek monitoring if the city does not invest in a legal easement first.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Thompson, I see your hand is up.
I agree it would be a waste of time and money to pursue Mill Creek as a supplemental water source for the Loofenholz Creek due to ongoing droughts and our climate emergency. Vote no based on the scientific evidence and climate experts' reports regarding our current drought trends. Vote no based on the well-researched and fact-based reports made by Trinidad's Water Advisory Committee, the Water Ad Hoc Committee, and Council Member Clumpus's report this evening. Vote no based on the findings of City of Trinidad's 2003 water supply feasibility study. Vote no based on Trinidad's current drought status and Loofenholz's current flows levels. As of this month, Trinidad's water bill states, quote, the water flow has decreased 28% since last week due to the drought and dry season, quote, closed. Our water bill also listed the stage 2 water shortage warnings for its customers. Please make a decision based on current facts, not dead ends like Mill Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Other comments from the general public or questions? Ms. Provost.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just think that, if I was sitting where you're sitting, I think you'd want to look at all options. And, the only thing that I don't see in this is the cost. What is the cost of doing this? And, but I would think that you would want to look at all options. And this is an option that, seems reasonable and possibly doable. And so that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the general public? All right, I'm going to bring it back. I have a question for Mr. Kinney. In the previous use of Mill Creek, there was a small earthen dam. How was the water treated and distributed to folks when we were using that earthen dam and reservoir?
Well, it was distributed with a pump and a water tank that was up there near the creek. I'm not sure what they were doing in terms of treatment back in 1957 when they first got the water right established, but it was kind of like a miniature system of what we have now.
So if we were to take this to one possible terminus, we would need some sort of filtration distribution system in addition to access to the water right. We would need some sort of distribution system and filtration.
Yeah, I would envision pumping it up to the existing treatment plant.
Okay.
Running it through just like is done with Loofenholz Creek.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that was the part, because I knew it was so long ago that water was used. I wasn't aware of what infrastructure was available. So back to the council for recommendations on, or not recommend, for basically reaction to the Water Advisory Committee's presentation on Mill Creek. Mr. Klompus.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. The 2003 water feasibility study by Winsler and Kelly indicated at that time the city used either individual wells or pumped the water from Mill Creek untreated to people's homes. So there was no treatment according to that report. So
wow.
Previous information I've gotten from Ryan Desmond is that the current water treatment plant is set up very specifically for water from Liffenholtz. Mill Creek water, although it's in a similar watershed, is different and may require tweaking the system to get it to perform properly to meet state regulation. So it's not as if you can just pump the water right in the plant and process it the same. It would have to be potentially processed a little bit differently. And I don't know whether they have the current infrastructure to be able to perform that duty.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Davies?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to propose a motion that we would be monitoring the flow of Mill Creek through the end of the next succeeding dry season. So that would put us into a year. We would have at least a year's worth of data, and it's going to be done manually and perhaps on a bi-weekly basis.
Richard?
I would like to know what the cost of that would be, because you'd have to have someone from Pacific Watershed like Todd Kramer come out twice a week and drive there to make measurements. It will not be an inexpensive exercise. So I would like to know what the cost would be to measure it twice a week for a year.
Bi-weekly is every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, but it's not going to be inexpensive, and I would prefer to know what the cost would be.
So I would propose to change my motion to bring this back to the next city council meeting with a cost measurement of a manual reading. And I heard Dave mention something about a stick in the creek. So I've seen that on state parks before. So that could be a possible measure, and then a Department of Public Works person could go by every 2 weeks and read the measure from the stick. I don't know if it would necessarily need to be from someone from Pacific Watersheds if it's such a manual thing. So that would be something to investigate.
Dave, it looks like you're ready to chime in.
Yeah, I was wondering too, like if you needed like a couple different points and then take the average or something like that. So I guess we might want some experts at least to see. So I agree with bringing it back at this point, especially if he's talking about going out a year. It'd be worth a month, know the cost, and then have something to compare it to. But something we think somebody we could handle independently a lot easier, or if we should hire a firm. So yeah, I would entertain that motion that we direct city staff to investigate a little more.
Eli, looks like your hand is up.
Yeah. Originally, I had put in 5 weeks because I figured that would get us to the beginning of October. So what I would suggest is just simply for the time being until our next council meeting, that we would have a weekly flow data just for the next 4 weeks, basically, or 5 weeks, whatever it takes to the next council meeting. And at that meeting, we'll have an exact cost as to what it would entail for a longer period of time. I thought that getting this information may be helpful for our meeting in October, where we can consider different options of, if we supplement Liffenholtz with Mill Creek, how much will that help us out? And I think it would be helpful information to have for the October meeting.
Okay, Mr. Davies.
I could agree too. Yeah, it'd be nice to have some information up till that point if we're going to bring this back. But I would like to also make a point of, it seems like Eli just said that he changed the recommendation that was put forward from the advisory committee. I listened to that meeting, and Bryce's recommendation was clearly for beyond 5 weeks. And now it's been put in here as an individual's need to change for some reason. If we're going to have advisory committees, let's stick with the advisory that comes from the committee and not have city staff interpret and change it from the time that it comes from the committee to the time that it comes to the city council would be my preference.
If I could weigh in.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in the staff report, I do say the Water Advisory Committee moved to recommend to the City Council to accumulate flow data from Mill Creek for the near term. And then I put in brackets, i.e. example, next 5 weeks. Then when I did the motion, I did say direct staff to accumulate a weekly flow data reading for Mill Creek for the next 5 weeks. That's my suggested motion, but it's not necessary. But at least from the meeting, I did get the impression that part of the discussion seemed to center around, let's try to get some of that data before our next council meeting. I gave me the impression like, that would be helpful information to consider when we're talking about various water options for the city, because of the fact that we are in a drought situation, and we are considering what are potential water options. So again, I wasn't trying to override the Water Advisory Committee, and I specifically put it example next 5 weeks. But I got the impression that it was in the near term, that it was a short-term time to do the flow data, and not that it would be for a year.
I understand what you're saying, but when you put it in the motion as 5 weeks as a recommended motion, and then with your words now that you decided that it was going to be 5 weeks, you thought it could be 5 weeks, that is taking the power away from the advisory committee. They already have limited powers being an advisory committee. So let's let the advisement come to the council as it exits the committee in the future, please.
Mr. Miller, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I don't recall in our meeting that we discussed the time frame for doing these. We said it would be a good idea to get data, and all of us volunteered for the water committee because we were concerned about water shortages. And there's general agreement, I think by most people on screen today, the water shortage is the dry season. So we don't have a problem at all during the wet season, and to exert staff time or anybody's time to measure when the water's flowing and we don't have a water problem doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The water committee did not vote for any particular length of time. They generally supported the notion that it would, we agreed that it would be good to get data. And in the minds of everybody that I knew on the water committee, and I'm not reading minds in particular, but our job on the committee is to deal with water shortages, which don't occur after the rains start flowing in a predictable way every winter. Okay, so I think a short-term thing was intended from the water committee, and I think that the city manager had the correct interpretation. We didn't actually take a vote, and we don't have any power. It's your job as a council to decide what you want to do.
That's exactly my point. Thank you for supporting me in that. I listened to the meeting, and you're exactly right. There was not a determination made. So when it comes to the council, I'm asking that also be reflected in a potential motion or in the information that is given to the council. If I hadn't listened to the meeting, I would have thought that it was for 5 weeks, the recommendation, unless Bryce would have spoken up as he did, saying that wasn't what his recommendation was. So we have two different discussions going on here right now. One being, it is an advisement from an advisory committee to bring it forth in an authentic manner next time. And then in this one, it would be that maybe the motion would be to monitor and then bring back with a more substantial, with a cost for an ongoing bi-weekly measurement for the next year.
Eli?
Yeah, I would suggest in the future, if you want to have the direct thing from the Water Advisory Committee, let them write the agenda item instead of me writing it, and then you can get it right from them. I think that would be the most appropriate approach. Since there were 2 agenda items from the Water Advisory Committee that I ended up putting together, I think just have them prepare it. That would be the best.
That might be a good idea, but before the committee leaves, you should already have the recommendation written down and understood from the committee. So I don't want to discuss this anymore because we're getting completely off topic in this policy and procedure. This is my opinion. I understand you don't agree with it, but I'd like to move forward with this item.
I'll agree with that. If we could have a motion, let's run it through the council. Mr. Grover.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we do a flow observation of Mill Creek until our next council meeting and get some information on what continued cost of those flow readings would be if we were to continue it.
I'll second that motion.
Elegant solution. So we have a first from Grover, a second from Davies. Gabe, if you could do a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I will just clarify briefly, just so I have the right motion here. I'm hearing a motion from, was it Davies and then seconded by Grover?
No, I actually made the motion.
Okay, thank you. So Grover, it's seconded by Davies to monitor the Mill Creek flow rate, let's say manually, until the next council meeting and return at that meeting with a request for proposal from Pacific Watershed Associates for ongoing flow rate monitoring, perhaps through the dry season 2022. Does that sound pretty accurate? Okay.
Yes, but I'd like to make a quick amendment based on what I just saw in the chat box. I would recommend at this point to just do it weekly because we're our limiting time, so at least we'll get a few readings.
Okay, so through monitoring the flow rate manually through until the next meeting on a weekly basis.
Correct.
Returning with a more substantial proposal for monitoring through the 2022 dry season. Got it? Okay, we're moving on with the vote. We'll start with Councilmember West.
Yes.
Klompus.
Yes.
Grover.
Yes.
Davies.
Yes.
And Mayor Ladwig.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. At this point, we will move to item number 8, presentation from Water Advisory Committee regarding trucking in water option during an emergency. I believe we turn this over to Mr. Grover.
Yeah, this is me, and Councilmember Klompus has going to share the screen there of my updated reservation. He should have that. I think you got to scroll down a little yeah, there you go. My updated, okay, after expanding my outreach to 3 more potable water supply companies, as projected on table A, I managed to speak to 1 more agent, Mara. She had been employed by 6 Rivers bulk water delivery for several years, so seemed to know what she was talking about. And the resulting average retail cost amongst the potable water delivery that I was able to confirm with experts like Mara and Bill Puryear, who Trinidad has dealt with for several years, was about 8 to 10 cents per gallon, or about $500 for 5,600 gallons. This would indicate that trucking water in Trinidad at current retail pricing is not sustainable based on our current water usage provided by the current Water Advisory Committee and the most current data by our engineers. So yes, apparatus engineered and installed for water treatment or other some point within the adjacent to the Trinidad water service would not be cost effective. So I don't think we should pursue trucking and water as a city at this time. My own personal thought, if somebody really wants to make the point of saving water and not having to pipe it in, they would have to set up gray water systems for irrigation and a potable water storage. And if you think about it, if you paid $500, you'd be paying a lot more than you normally would for water. But I don't think people use that much. You'd be paying a lot more than you pay the city now, but you'd be saving the city's ecosystem basically. That's probably not feasible. There's probably couldn't get enough people on board to do that. So that's pretty much where we are now. I have been doing my own observations, traversing the riparian area of Mill Creek. The surface supply, the water's definitely coming from below the surface. It's ice cold. It was great when I hurt my ankle a couple weeks ago. I sat in the water. So we know it's coming from deep down because it's almost freezing. I couldn't even stand in it more than a minute, which is encouraging. I mean, they could have quite a bit of water, but when we talk about running low at the surface, we're talking about altering the ecosystem, especially the cumulative effects. Right now we have clean water there and we see the bugs on top, and they're the kind that the birds like. They're real meaty and stuff like that. But when we start losing our surface flow and it's not consistent at all, we get different kinds of critters there, and it just changes a lot. So we all want to keep this place pristine. So instead of looking like 15, 20 years, I'm trying to look about 40 or 50 years into the 2100 here. So that's a little off topic, but I had to throw that in there too, because just obviously the whole idea of anything is to have ample water supply. Any municipality, we have to put that as number one. So I'm willing to entertain any questions from council or people in the audience.
Questions, comments for Mr. Grover? And Richard, I think you're sharing the screen. If you don't mind unsharing it, just so I can see everybody. But if we do need to go back, we can certainly get there.
There you go.
Did you have your hand up, Richard?
I did. So yes. I just want to be clear, Dave. What you're saying is that if there was a plan B for an emergency, trucked in water is really not the answer. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes. We do not have the apparatus set up, and as I think you even discussed, I mean, it would be clean, so it probably wouldn't need the treatment, but yeah, you would have to come up with some way of getting it in there, and you'd have to continually have trucks. There's not enough hours in the day really to bring enough for, especially with our current leaks and stuff like that. So that would definitely be, last on the list. And like I said, the only way it would work is if somebody could do it themselves to keep and have their own system or something at this point anyways. And I believe I talked to our Public Works Director, Ryan, a little bit about it, and he agreed that it would be a pretty big deal to have it be a viable source of city water.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments for Mr. Grover on this topic?
And just one more thing I want to say too. It was very difficult to actually get a hold of people and talk to them. I was surprised because there was about 10 places I reached out to, and I only talked to the 2 people. Got maybe 4 emails back out of 10. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but that was ones that were even in the service that considered this part of their service area. So that's just something else to think about. And not in California's whole water situation is changing. So
I suspect, David, this time of year that no one is at the phone because they're delivering water to remote locations in southern Humboldt and Neeland and places that historically have relied on trucked in water. So I'm guessing.
Well, they were disconnected numbers and,
Okay.
and no email return. So it's probably a tough game to be a water supply person. It was one of my conclusions.
Any other comments, questions for Mr. Grover? All right, that is, I believe that concludes. No, we have one more presentation from Ms. Kelly, I believe, on on-site water storage. Is that correct? Wasn't there one more?
No, she's not doing that for this meeting.
No,
There's one
not
more
for this
agenda
meeting.
item.
Sorry, not for this meeting, but in general, the Water Advisory Committee also, Cheryl spent quite a bit of time, I believe, putting together a presentation for that. Will that be coming in the future?
Yes.
Yes?
It should be. I mean,
Okay, yeah. I wanted to make sure. I was late for a meeting, and I just want to make sure I had read that correctly. So we will look for one more presentation from the Water Advisory Committee in the future. With that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is discussion decision to survey water system customers regarding water source options. Who will be introducing this?
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
So back in August, when we began to have discussions about what the future path would be for Trinidad to develop water resiliency, the city clerk received a number of emails, and those in August the 10th who supported this in the city were 16, those opposed 3. It was 5-1 in favor of this. What I would like to know prior to the October 12th meeting, where 5 council members get to decide the future water resiliency of the town, that we get to hear from our constituents. This survey would be a portion, like say 350 words or 500 words written by someone who supports Humboldt Bay Water District water. Another individual who could be selected would write 350 or 500 words supporting water catchment or developing the watershed above Liffenholtz. And this could be mailed out to residents in Trinidad with a question at the end: which one would you prefer the council to recommend or support? So as a council member, I don't want to guess what my constituents want. I would like to hear from them. And this gives us the opportunity to present this during the October meeting to understand what do our residents want, because that's really who I represent and the rest of our council members represent. So this is an opportunity with a timeline of so many words submitted to the city clerk or the city manager. They would put together this one piece of paper, mail it out, and residents could either mail it back by a certain date described here. They could email a response, they could drop it off at the town hall. But it would give the city council and the public an ability to know what the feedback is from the actual residents of our town. And the reason I'm recommending this is that we had more people write into the city council who live outside of Trinidad, who don't live here, who would not be impacted by this decision. I'm interested in the residents of Trinidad and what their best wishes are as we move forward, making this very important decision.
And by Rich, I just want to get clarification. Are you saying not water customers, but only people living within the 1 square mile?
It would be residents of Trinidad, including Trinidad water customers.
Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure that was, because not all our customers live within the city limits.
Correct. But I really want to hear from our water customers and our residents of Trinidad what they want versus what individuals want who live outside the city and would not be impacted by a decision made by the city council.
Questions, comments for Richard from the council?
Did you say that was going to be mailed out paper, or was that going to be something available online digitally with like a drop down and something like that?
I would prefer that, just because of the timeline, that it be mailed out, but they could respond by email to the city clerk or by dropping it off or by mailing it back. But there are very specific timelines in this recommendation that they respond by a certain date to make sure, just like when you have to vote, you have to get it in by a certain date. I want to make sure that we understand the timeline. It's very carefully crafted so that everyone has the chance to write this up, to mail it out, and to get the responses back so that the city council can look at this and say, what do our constituents want in our community?
Other thoughts from the council before I open it up to the public? Go ahead. Let's go with our city manager and then the general public.
Yeah, I just want to mention, because of the fact that Gabe, our city clerk, has, since Angela left, has been pretty much running the city clerk's office by himself. We recently got Anton. Anton's helping, but he works part-time. And so Gabe has, instead of having a full-time person with him at the moment, he has a part-time person with him at the moment. The other person won't be coming in until later, like the first week of October. And this calls for quite a bit of work on the part of the city clerk. So I just want to make sure that we could work it out if we're going to commit to it. I don't know if Gabe wants to weigh in, but I did want to share that concern because that's something that I know Gabe's trying and I'm trying to keep up with as many things as possible. And this seems to be quite labor intensive. So I don't know if Gabe wants to weigh in, and then maybe if we could figure out a way to make this work without too much involvement from the city clerk's office.
Gabe, any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I have lots of thoughts, but projects like this, when there's 2 weeks left of the month, there's a lot of work that's already in motion, that the city is facing, whether they be just deadlines, general activities, or even, bigger items such as water billing and follow-up from city council meetings, upcoming planning commission meeting, and I could go on and on about the amount of work that we already have in motion. So I guess the best I could do is, just give you an honest answer, which is, we'll do the best we can to get the information out there. So as much as prepared in advance and handed to us on a silver platter, the better chance that this thing will actually be a successful endeavor. So, laying the heavy lifting on the city clerk's office to be the quarterback for whether it be, wrangling the statements and stuffing envelopes and then distributing the results. Not only that, but answering questions from people wondering what they just got in their mail and why, where it's coming from. My thoughts would be that the better prepared the information is coming to us, stuffing, stamping, mailing envelopes, piece of cake. So I'll just ask that maybe we add that to this process, which would be some support from the proponents of this effort. And I believe I see a hand up, so I suppose that's a yes vote for that.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, for your candid response. Mr. Miller, I see your hand is up.
This in response to both Eli and Gabe. I think that as proposed here in the background statement, there's time that the staff would just identify adherence of each plan. That's not too hard because we've had several hearings in Water Committee and in the City Council, and there's a small number of people on each of these possible solutions who could be asked to write and submit according to in other words, the city staff wouldn't have to write anything of a statement and say, this group of people or individual persons, as you choose, submit a statement by September 20th. And that statement would be published along with a statement from the other position. And I personally would be happy to help stuff envelopes and anything else in the time frame between September 20th and 24th, whatever it takes to get in the car and go run to a print shop or whatever is necessary, I'd be happy to help. And I think we could probably, there's enough people on call who are interested in this kind of public survey. You could get 3 or 4 or 5 volunteers to help out with what you need to do. Same thing about compiling stuff at the end. Certainly, there's questions and accuracy of voting and all that sort of thing. I wouldn't be involved in tabulating the final results, but I'd certainly be happy to help under supervised conditions by city staff to do whatever it would take to get the papers ready so that it would be much easier for you to compile these. I think you can get help from people, and the statements themselves would come from the adherents, according to this statement. The only thing I'd make a recommendation is the council is considering, because it's pretty clear timeline laid out here, is what is necessary to happen. And there was a suggestion that people make a statement of 350 words. That's probably a little bit small. Richard mentioned 350, 500, 500 to 700 is probably more appropriate for each side, but certainly set a maximum for each of the adherents to make a statement, get them to Gabe. Gabe prints them off just the way they're printed from whoever's printer comes from, and says, this is from team A, this is from team B, whatever. I think you can get help, Gabe.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Other questions, comments from the council? Richard?
Yeah, I do appreciate the work that Gabe has done along the city manager. When it came time to put stickers on the back of the water bills for the first drought warning, I did it personally, and I would be more than happy to work in the office to make this happen. I don't want to be the one responsible to tabulate the results so that people don't feel that I'm biased, but I'd be more than happy to collect the other opinion. I'd be more than happy to get it typed up, get it ready for the printer. If necessary, print it off myself, stuff envelopes, and get it done. I want to make sure that this important issue is not completed because of a time crunch or because of other activities. I can take that off the plate, be more than happy to take responsibility for it, and work for Gabe or for Eli in that capacity to get this done.
I certainly appreciate what I assume to be an effort to get more involvement by having more forms of feedback. I do feel that the city staff time is very well spoken for right now, and I also believe that we've seen up to 70 people, 75 people in a meeting giving their public feedback. So while I appreciate the nature and the sort of the impetus behind this, I would prefer if we used city staff time for other projects and allow the meeting to progress in October as it has in the past. Yes, sir.
Most of the feedback that the council has received has been for those that do not live in Trinidad or are not customers. The last time that we had emails sent in, it was up to 24 people outside the city that were interested in this. My concern is this is a very important decision for the council. And to say that we've already heard enough or that we're just going to wait, to me, is not being a representative government. We represent our constituents, and I would really like to know on a plan or decision that could impact folks for the next 50 years, that we understand exactly where they are. And without that, I don't know how I can make a decision as a council member that would represent my constituents. Having more information to me is a benefit than having less. Thank you.
Mr. Kinney, then Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't think this has ever been done before. The city has made a lot of important decisions over the years, and as far as I know, this would be a first. And I think I have to agree with the mayor that, it's not the right time with the city staff being shorthanded. And, there's also issues when they do this with state initiatives and so forth, the statements pro and con are, oftentimes, it's oftentimes litigated because the two sides are saying, well, wait a minute, they're saying something that's not true. And, a judge has to decide whether that's going to be on the ballot statement or not. And it's just anybody who sends an email or appears by Zoom at the meeting, all they have to do is say, yeah, I'm a water customer, or I'm a resident of the city, or I'm not. And then who's, on the water customer or not. I mean, I can understand you want to, give more weight to people who have bought into the system by being water customers, but there's an easy way to ascertain that without sort of doing a quasi public initiative program with just so little amount of time and the staff already committed to other important things. So I think I would recommend against this in this instance.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney. Mr. Miller, then Ms. Levine.
Thank you. All listeners.
Then Ms. Thompson, sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. To the last speaker, I might just note that during my time on the council, 10 years, and my time as mayor, there were many, many issues that I felt comfortable deciding for my constituents because they were of consequence, but not huge consequence. And there were a few issues which were of major consequence. And I personally wanted to have a survey of users. And during the time I was on the council, I asked that we have an email list developed. We as a town have the capability to become more democratic, especially for issues that are majorly kind of existential. There's been a few in the last couple of years when we should have surveyed our population. And it feels just a little bit anti-democratic to say, oh, we don't have the time. When you have people volunteering to help staff, when you have, if you look carefully at this background statement, the dates here give enough time to get for each side to prepare a statement, the city to prepare a statement that says the city does not take any responsibility for these statements, that covers them legally. We could even check with Bryce to make sure that this covers the city legally, and each side could take their own consequences for legally being honest. But these are a very important issue, which would decide many things for this town for the next 50 years or so. And for people to say, well, we've heard enough, and we don't have enough staff time, sounds just a bit anti-democratic. At some issues, we need to survey the people who are concerned. Not most of them, but a few. And the fact that we haven't done it before doesn't mean we shouldn't start now. There is time to do it. There is sufficient staff time because if you ask, you will get people who will volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Levine?
The council, in writing up the objectives of WAC, wanted WAC. WAC is the Water Advisory Committee. The objective number one was to reach out to the public, create a public forum. And this is what this letter is doing. It may surprise you, but many water customers are not familiar with these issues one way or the other. So I think this will accomplish objective number one, to create a public forum. And the Water Advisory Committee is advising the council to go ahead with this letter. There are a number of volunteers that will help with the office work, including myself, stuffing envelopes, whatever. I really think you should go ahead and authorize this. I think it would benefit the community, and it was done once before. Oh gosh, if you look in, what is that? It's in county documents someplace. It'll come to me. The Planning Commission, very early on in its planning, sent out letters to the public. And don't quote me, I think it was about water issues, but if you look in the Planning Commission documents, you will find that this has been done once before. A long time ago, decades ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
Yeah, I think it should be sent out also, not only to get feedback from Trinidad residents and Trinidad water customers, but it's also a way of giving them information. Because as Ms. Levine said, a lot of people just aren't aware what's going on because they live their own lives. They think, oh, we're going to have water. It's not going to be an issue, even though they're aware of the drought. It is a major decision. It affects us. And you should have input from your stakeholders. The other issue is when I talk to people, and I have spoken to people, they're under the impression that if we did connect to Humboldt Bay Municipal Water, that means that we are saying that okay, now the hotel is approved. People assume that if we don't connect, then the hotel's not going to go through, even though that's not true. So there's a lot of miscommunication or whatever. I don't know why people believe what they believe. But the second part of that is you as a council will have the input of your stakeholders, of people that will be affected. Most of the people that spoke out in beginning of this year were people that were outside, just as Mr. Klumpus said, they were outside the water district. Most of the people that were opposed. So it would be to make a decision as a council, I would assume, want to know what's going on. You'd want to be transparent with the information to everyone because people aren't informed. And then I would also hope that you would make a decision in October based on real data. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding this topic? Ms. Provost.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is certainly something that might be of importance to city to find out from their constituents, of options that are afforded ahead here. But I caution about the rush. When you rush through things, you miss something. And so what I see here is you have people doing different options, the develop the store water from level holds is one option, and you have 350 words, and then you have the participating in the pipeline, that's another three. So you have different people presenting these statements that are going to go out to your community. What I don't see is that the council is going to review that survey before it goes out to the community. And I think that that's really important because you don't want to be mixed up. You want to make sure it's very clear what you're asking your continuance, your customers, and your responsibility. If it's coming out from the city, then you need to see what that survey looks like and what it says. And is it really clear on what you're asking? And I agree that you cannot put your staff in this time crunch situation. My next question is, why do you have to have this so like within the month? If you really want to get the information and you want to do it right, take the time that's needed to be really clear with your questions and to be really clear what when people respond, what that response means and how you're going to interpret that. So I would just say, why the rush? Take the time, do it thoroughly, be clear in what you're asking your water users, and then the cost. It all comes back to cost. What is this going to cost you, and is it worth that? And it probably will be, but I just think that there's some other things that you need to think about with with this decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Provost. Let me bring it back to the council for final comments, and then perhaps we could have a motion regarding this agenda item. Mr. West?
I'm not sure who's going to be writing these things up, but I'm just concerned that we have to get things written up. We have to have both sides written up and have it cleared up, so we not only that we understand it, but that whoever's writing these things up is making it is kind of representing just the different sides, and it's clear. And I'm just concerned that getting it all done and getting it out so we can understand it, and then trying to get that information back, and still in the process, we're going to have to use the city staff and city money to do this. I just think it's awfully short. I know it's important to understand this, but this doesn't seem like it's going to be. Just doesn't seem like it can get done in time, and no matter what, we're still going to be using a city. And I don't see right now the plan to make sure the city is relieved of at least a lot of the study. I'm hearing, yeah, we will do this, but it hasn't been put together very clearly. So I just think this is a little fast and a little not enough time to think about it. And I'm just not sure who's going to be writing up I know our committee will write up the side that they have, but I'm just not sure about the other side. So I'm having a hard time thinking that this is something worthwhile at this time.
Mr. Grover?
Yeah, I kind of can.
You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, I was kind of concurring with the thing about not being able to assess what was written up, because we would obviously want both proponents and opponents of the pipeline being in to be the best that we could get, but it's so subjective when people write. That's where I'm losing how it would be done in a way that could be understood by council and constituents alike.
Other comments from the council? Dwight, I see your hand is up, and I'm with the council now, so please hold that thought. Mr. Davies?
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot. This is very problematic. Fact checking would not be done. And as has been brought up earlier, this stuff is litigated on ballots, on official ballots. I think this is a can of worms that should not be opened. And I don't support this idea.
Other comments from the council? All right, let me, Dwight, you have the floor for 60 seconds, please.
Thank you, all of you. If you would read just very carefully the background statement in front of you, okay? It's very clear. All of us on camera have heard all of the arguments over the last number of months. You're not going to get a bunch of lies. You're going to have Dave Hankin, and you're going to have Don Allen, and you're going to have Bryce representing the side that says, and others, even council people could commit to this, saying, here's the reasons for having a self-reliant system based on Leavenworth Creek. You're going to have me and a few other folk who say, we are concerned about having a reliable water source during the dry season. You're not going to get a bunch of lies. And this time frame, if you look at it carefully, there's enough time. There's not a large problem taking 2 sheets of paper or 3 sheets of paper, folding them and stuffing into 300 envelopes. And every month, the city spends money to send water bills out, a small amount of extra money. We're not talking about a huge amount of money, but we are talking about a democratic process. And I think several of you are putting up smoke screens for saying, I just don't like the idea of getting information from folks. And there's, we can't afford staff time. You've got volunteers to help with staff time. You think you're being
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate it. Council, let's bring it back to a motion. And I'm not sure if I've weighed in or not, but I believe the public meeting and the comment period before the public meeting is adequate to And I think we all have a responsibility to reach out to our neighbors and our friends to encourage them to participate as they already have, and perhaps get some new folks to participate. So I'm going to make a motion that we do not send out a survey, and that we rely on the public comment period and the open meeting to determine the next agenda item at the October meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Could you repeat that again, Mr.
Right.
You're coming out against the survey?
I am making a motion that we do not send a separate survey regarding the water as proposed in the agenda packet, or sorry, the council packet, and that we instead use the public process. And we have a first and we have a second. Any further comments or questions? Gabe, if you could do a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So we've got a motion by Mayor Ladwig, seconded by Councilmember Davies, to not send out a separate survey as proposed in the council meeting packet. We'll go ahead with the vote. Councilmember West.
Yes.
Councilmember Klompus.
No.
Councilmember Grover.
No.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
And Mayor Ladwig.
Yes.
So we have 3 yeses in support of not sending out the survey. That would be Councilmembers West, Davies, and Ladwig, and 2 noes, Klompus and Grover. So the motion passes to not send out the survey.
Thank you for that summary. And I am very serious and I'm very sincere that I want public input. And I believe that our meetings in the past have been a great platform for folks to weigh in. And based on the materials presented in the packet and the discussion at hand. So thank you very much for that discussion. We'll move on to our last item, discussion decision regarding a whole host of legislative activities that Mr. Naffa is bringing to our attention. So Eli, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. So all of these are brought to us courtesy of the League of California Cities. They have a new name. They changed it so that it's just called Cal Cities. They felt that that would be easier for the public. So the first one is 10A, and this is AB 361, sponsored by Revis and Robert, and it's regarding open meetings during declared state of emergency. The League is suggesting support. This would take immediate effect as an urgency statute and require a 2/3 vote in both the Senate and the Assembly to move to the governor's desk. What this would do is basically extend the executive order from March of 2020 that created emergency measures in response for COVID-19 pandemic, allowing cities to conduct remote meetings under the modified Brown Act requirements. And the current one would expire September 30th, 2021. So this is to extend it, meaning that we could continue to have meetings via Zoom or WebEx, and as long as the pandemic continues. So I just wanted to get the direction from the council on these 3 items. Do you want to do them individually, one by one, and give me direction if I would send some kind of a letter to them indicating our support?
It seems easiest to keep track of all this if we do it one by one. Council, are you good to weigh in on AB's 361 and then continue on?
Yes, because I agree with some of them and not all of them. So.
Okay.
Yes.
So discussion questions for Eli regarding AB 361 that would, if passes, allows us to continue to meet virtually as long as the pandemic is a serious concern. I'm certainly in favor of it.
Yeah, we just have to vote, right? We don't have to motion because we're right. Because
We
we're
need public comment and the process.
Yeah. Right. Sure. Right.
So any council comment on this or before I go to the public? Okay. Public comment on supporting AB 361 to extend virtual meetings. Okay. Back to the council for a motion.
I move to support AB 361 continuing emergency remote meetings.
I'll second that.
First by Davies, second by Grover. Gabe, can you do a roll call just so that we get through this without any questions?
Yes, so we got a motion. Davies, seconded by Grover to, let's see, in support of AB 361 open meetings during declared state of emergency. Councilmember West?
Yes.
Klompus?
Yes.
Grover?
Yes.
Davies?
Yes.
Hadwig?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Mr. Naffa, the next issue, please.
Okay, this is regarding SB 9 Atkins. This is a piece of legislation that has already been to both the Assembly and the Senate and has passed both the Assembly and the Senate and is on the governor's desk for action. This is the League of California Cities is suggesting a veto request by the governor, asking the governor, he has until October 10th to take action and veto the bill. The bill will require a local government to ministerially approve a housing development containing up to 4 units on a parcel that was otherwise designated for one single family home, and require local governments to ministerially approve an urban lot split, thus creating 2 independent lots that may be sold separately that formerly were one single family lot. Again, the league is suggesting a veto by the governor, and what we would do is send a letter requesting a veto by the governor if the council so chooses.
Questions from the council for Eli? Public comment regarding the recommended veto for Senate Bill 9. Seeing none, back to council for a motion.
I would just like to make a comment on it.
Sure.
This is it's very selective from my research. It would not affect many thousands of city lots in the state. It would, you would have to be, your lot would have to be this correct size, et cetera, in order to support something like that, from what I've understood. It is helping some housing in the city or in the state of California. As we all know, that there's some huge issues right now. I haven't had a chance, with that said, I haven't had a chance to superly divulge into this. I personally am not comfortable voting on this as a city recommendation. But I don't think it would affect the city of Trinidad. Our lots are too small from what I've looked at before. Not that we should only vote on if it affects us, but we've heard that argument before that we should vote on something that only affects us. So that's my comment with that. I haven't decided how I will carry forward on this.
I concur with Councilmember Davies too. In my limited research, I would call it too. I don't know that much about it, but I wouldn't be comfortable supporting that veto right now because I've maybe only seen the good part of it. I'm sure there's other things going on that I'm not aware of, but at this point, I wouldn't feel comfortable supporting this Part B to request that.
Jack?
Yeah, I agree that I don't know enough about this to even take a vote on it. I need to read more.
Any thoughts, Mr. Klumpus?
No, I'm like others, I'm not as familiar. I don't know what impact this would have on parts of the state that require or should have more housing. Maybe this is a good thing in some areas of the state where people don't have homes, and this gives them the chance to have an affordable home. But again, I don't know enough about this. My apologies.
I'm merely uncomfortable with anything being taken out of the public process. But you all raise good points that perhaps in large urban areas, there's a backlog of this sort of thing that needs to happen. I was all set to vote to support the veto, but now you've raised enough questions that I don't see a vote coming from us that is well informed. So at this point, I'm really not hearing anybody that wants to make a motion to support this. Is that a true statement?
And can we abstain as a council from this particular part?
Sure. We don't have to vote.
Yeah, we just don't. There's no vote. We're not weighing in as the megalopolis of Trinidad. We're not going to weigh in and change the course of California. So at this point, Eli, can you take us on to the next issue?
Yeah, certainly. So the next issue is regarding the league meeting, the Cal Cities meeting. They will be having their conference September 22nd, 23rd, 24th. And at that meeting, they will be proposing 2, possibly 3 pieces of legislation. So far, they've sent us information about 2 of them. This is the one that I felt was most appropriate, and that's why I put it on here. So in this particular one, the League is requesting the state legislature to pass legislation. So basically to have someone from either the state assembly or the state senate sponsor legislation for what they call a fair and equitable distribution of the Bradley Burns 1% local sales tax from in-state online purchases. So what this does is that the cities receive 1 cent on every dollar for sales that are made in stores, restaurant, car dealerships, and other locations. Also, currently, there has been, I'm not sure exactly if it's already in place, but either way, if someone has a distribution center within their city limits, such as an Amazon distribution center, then all the sales for that region would be coming to that distribution center and the city that has it in their city limits, versus this suggested legislation would make it go to where the in-state online purchase occurred. So in other words, everyone in Trinidad, when they buy something from Amazon, the city of Trinidad would get that 1 cent on every dollar, versus one city or several cities benefiting just because they're larger than us, more than 1 square mile, and have room to have distribution centers, and then they get all of the sales tax revenue. So this is to help cities such as us get what would be our fair share. And then this way, wherever those purchases are made. So large cities like LA would get a lot, but cities like Trinidad will still get our share. And rather than cities like Eastvale, which is one that told me don't support this, they have an Amazon distribution center, and they would no longer receive that revenue. So that's why I'm suggesting that we support this particular request by the league for a sponsorship by either an assembly member or a senator to carry a bill to distribute the 1% sales tax to wherever the in-state online purchase occurs.
Questions, comments for Eli?
Thanks for explaining that. You did a real good job to make it, simple to understand for me.
Okay. Other comments, questions from the council? Public comment at this point? Anyone have a comment they want to weigh in on? Ms. Provost?
Just a question, Eli. I'm sorry, city manager. If you're not within the city limits, would those sales tax actually go to the county, possibly? And I'm thinking, for example, McKinleyville, which is unincorporated, and they do have a large population in that area. Would those sales tax go to the county of Humboldt, which supports fire and police and things like that? So I didn't get to look through this handout, but I was just wondering if you knew that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. It would go to the county when it's an area that's unincorporated.
Other questions, comments from the public regarding this issue? All right, seeing none, bringing it back to the council for motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we support Cal City's resolution at the league conference to request the state legislatures to pass legislation for fair and equitable distribution of Bradley's Burns 1% local sales tax from in-state online purchases.
I'll second that.
Nicely done, Dave. Nicely done. So we have a first from Grover and a second from West. Gabe, if you can do an roll call, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So motion Grover, seconded West, as read by Councilmember Grover, which is included in the packet to support this resolution. We'll start with Councilmember West.
Yes.
Klompus.
Yes.
Grover.
Yes.
Davies.
Yes.
And Ladwig.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams, and thanks, Eli, for bringing this to our attention and passing it along to the League of Cities. Or what are we calling it now? The Cal
Cities.
Cal Cities. Thank you for passing it on to Cal Cities. And I believe that concludes our packet of information for this evening. So at this point, thank you very much for all who weighed in on tonight's discussion.
Future agenda items.
And if we could move to future agenda items, that would be great. Richard, I saw your hand up.
Yes, three things. I want to make sure these are on the agenda for October. The Pacific Watershed Associates report for discussion. Number two, GHD's report for discussion. And number three, an agenda item for the council to debate and vote on participating in a pipeline with the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District to the Trinidad's water plant.
So noted. Other, Mr. Davies?
Yes. During our budget conversations back in June, we talked about raising TOT tax to 12%. I was told it was going to be on an agenda back in July. I'm still waiting for that to happen. So I'd like to see that done. We've already missed the entire summer in which we could have benefited from an extra 2%, which is in the range of 20K or something like that from doing some math. So I'm disappointed we haven't seen that yet, and I'd like to see it on the next available agenda.
I agree. And we also have, I believe the Planning Commission was intending to send the STR ordinance. So perhaps we can fit that in as well. Just because it needs to, one, it needs to get off the plate of the Planning Commission. And two, I believe it's ready for prime time. Other agenda items? Richard?
Yeah, just a couple. After the council's decision on connecting or not connecting the Humboldt Bay Water District, there's a meeting October 14th with the Humboldt Bay Water District board for the city council to deliver their decision. I don't know whether we need to make that an agendized item and appoint someone to do that, or whether it can just be a council member and staff directed to talk to Humboldt Bay Water District. It's their board meeting on the 14th. And then the second item that I wanted to have is an update on the water rate study to reevaluate our water rates this year to see whether we need to raise them to take care of some repairs and other activities.
Okay. I believe, and Eli, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the city manager and a councilor would be appropriate to attend that meeting on the 16th or whatever the day is, 14th. Shortly after our meeting. Eli, does that make sense to you?
Yes, that does make sense. And, of course, whatever message we may have to convey.
Yeah. And that is a very full agenda for October. So we will do our best to get this into October. I expect that the first two items would take up a fairly significant, three items would take up a significant portion of the evening to make sure we accommodate all those who wish to weigh in. And then perhaps shortly after that, we may have to wait until a November meeting for some of these other ones, but they are very much important, and we will do our best to get them on the agenda as soon as possible. So with that, I believe we can adjourn the evening.
One quick comment.
Yes, sir.
Newsom is still our governor. So.
All right. Thank you for that update. And thank you for everyone's input, and we will see you next time.
You guys. Bye.
Good night, everyone.